I never thought I'd return to the house I grew up in. The memories were too heavy, too complicated, and I had spent years trying to escape them. Yet here I was, standing in front of the old, weathered door of my childhood home, my suitcase in hand, and my heart pounding in my chest. The air smelled like rain, and the faint sound of wind chimes echoed from the porch. 3 years. That's how long it had been since I'd last seen my family. Life abroad had been liberating, but it also came with its own set of challenges. I had left everything behind. My parents, my younger brother, Caleb, and the weight of expectations that always seemed to follow me like a shadow. But now I was back. Not because I wanted to be, but because I had to be. The door creaked open before I could knock, and there she was, my mother, her face lighting up like the sun breaking through storm clouds. "Elliot!" she exclaimed, pulling me into a tight embrace. Her familiar lavender scent wrapped around me, and for a moment, the years melted away. "Hi, Mom," I said, my voice muffled against her shoulder. "You look so thin. Have you been eating properly? Oh, never mind that. Come in, come in." She ushered me inside, her excitement contagious. The house hadn't changed much. The same worn-out couch sat in the living room. The same family photos hung on the walls, and the same faint smell of cinnamon lingered in the air. It was both comforting and unsettling, like stepping into a time capsule. As I set my suitcase down by the staircase, I heard footsteps approaching. Caleb appeared at the top of the stairs, his hair tousled and his expression unreadable. He had grown taller, his once boyish features now sharper, more mature. "Elliot," he said, his voice deeper than I remembered. "Hey, Caleb," I replied, unsure of what else to say. For a moment, we just stared at each other, the silence stretching between us like a chasm. Then, to my surprise, a small smile tugged at the corner of his lips. "Welcome home." Dinner that night was a whirlwind of laughter and stories. My mother had gone all out, cooking my favorite dishes: roast chicken, mashed potatoes, and her famous apple pie. My father, ever the quiet observer, sat at the head of the table, his eyes crinkling with amusement as my mother bombarded me with questions. "How's work? Are you seeing anyone? Do you still play the piano?" I answered as best as I could, dodging some questions and elaborating on others. Caleb chimed in occasionally, his dry wit catching me off guard. He had always been the quiet one, the shadow to my spotlight, but tonight, he seemed different, more confident, more assured. After dinner, I excused myself and headed upstairs to my old room. It was exactly as I had left it. Posters of bands I no longer listened to, a bookshelf filled with dusty novels, and my old desk cluttered with forgotten trinkets. I sat on the edge of the bed, running my fingers over the faded quilt. A knock at the door pulled me from my thoughts. "Come in," I called. The door creaked open, and Caleb stepped inside, his hands shoved into his pockets. "Hey," he said, leaning against the doorframe. "Hey," I replied, gesturing for him to sit. He hesitated for a moment before crossing the room and sitting on the edge of the desk. "So, how's life in the big city?" "It's different," I admitted. "Busy, loud, but exciting in its own way." He nodded, his gaze fixed on the floor. "I bet. Must be nice to get away from all this." I frowned, sensing an undercurrent to his words. "It's not like I left to escape you guys," I said carefully. "Didn't you?" he asked, his tone neutral but his eyes searching mine. I opened my mouth to respond but found I didn't have an answer. The truth was I had left to escape the expectations, the pressure, and yes, even the complicated relationship I had with Caleb. "I needed space," I said finally. "But that doesn't mean I didn't miss you." He looked at me then, really looked at me, and for a moment I saw the little brother I used to know, the one who used to follow me around, who used to look up to me like I was his hero. "I missed you too," he said quietly. The words hung in the air, heavy with unspoken emotions. "Well," he said, standing up and shoving his hands back into his pockets. "It's good to have you back, Elliot, even if it's just for a while." "Thanks," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. As he left the room, I leaned back against the headboard, my mind swirling with thoughts. Coming home had been harder than I expected, but for the first time in a long time, I felt a glimmer of hope, hope that maybe, just maybe, we could find our way back to each other. The night was quiet, save for the occasional creak of the house settling. Lying in bed, I stared at the ceiling, memories of the past mingling with the uncertainties of the present. Coming home was supposed to be simple, a brief visit before I returned to my life. But as I drifted off to sleep, I couldn't shake the feeling that this trip would be anything but simple. The next morning, I woke up to the smell of coffee and the faint hum of a conversation drifting up from the kitchen. It took me a moment to remember where I was. The familiar creak of the floorboards as I got out of bed reminded me. Home. I threw on a sweatshirt and made my way downstairs. My mother was at the stove, flipping pancakes, while my father sat at the table with his newspaper, glasses perched on the tip of his nose. It was a scene so ordinary, so mundane, that it felt almost surreal. "Morning, sweetheart," my mom said, glancing over her shoulder. "Hope you're hungry. I made plenty." "Morning," I mumbled, rubbing the sleep from my eyes. Caleb was already at the table, a half-eaten plate of pancakes in front of him. He looked up as I entered, his expression unreadable. "Morning," he said simply. "Morning," I replied, sliding into the chair across from him. The conversation was light, my mother asking about my plans for the day, my father mentioning something about the garden needing work. Caleb stayed mostly quiet, his focus seemingly on his plate, but I could feel his eyes on me every now and then. After breakfast, I decided to take a walk around the neighborhood. It was strange how everything felt smaller, more contained, like the world had shrunk in my absence. The park where Caleb and I used to play as kids was still there, though the swings were rusted, and the slide looked like it hadn't been used in years. I found myself wandering down the old trail behind the house, the one that led to the creek. The path was overgrown, the trees thicker than I remembered, but the sound of the water rushing over rocks was the same. I stood there for a while, letting the memories wash over me. "Elliot." I turned to see Caleb standing a few feet away, his hands shoved into the pockets of his jacket. "Didn't think you'd follow me," I said, half smiling. He shrugged. "Figured you'd come here. You always used to." I nodded, turning back to the creek. "It's peaceful here. Always has been." He stepped closer, standing beside me. For a moment, neither of us said anything. The silence between us wasn't uncomfortable, but it wasn't exactly easy either. "You know," he said finally, "I used to come here a lot after you left." I glanced at him, surprised. "Really? Why?" He hesitated, his gaze fixed on the water. "I don't know. I guess it just reminded me of you, of us." I didn't know what to say to that. The weight of his words settled over me like a heavy blanket. "I was angry at you for a long time," he admitted, his voice quiet. "When you left, felt like you didn't care, like you didn't care about me." "Caleb," I started, but he held up a hand, stopping me. "I get it now," he said. "You needed to leave. You needed to figure things out for yourself. But back then, I didn't understand. I just felt abandoned." The guilt hit me like a punch to the gut. I had known, deep down, that my leaving would hurt him, but hearing him say it out loud made it all the more real. "I'm sorry," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "I never meant to hurt you. I didn't know how to stay." He nodded, his jaw tightening. "I know, and I'm not saying this to make you feel bad. I needed you to know. Thank you for telling me," I said. We stood there for a while longer, the sound of the creek filling the silence. Felt like a small step forward, a crack in the wall that had been between us for so long. When we got back to the house, my mom was in the kitchen, humming to herself as she chopped vegetables. She looked up as we entered, her face lighting up. "Oh, good, you're back. I was just about to start lunch." Caleb muttered something about needing to check on something upstairs and disappeared before I could say anything. "Everything okay?" my mom asked, glancing at me. Yeah, I said, forcing a smile. Just catching up. She nodded, but I could tell she wasn't convinced. My mom had always had a way of seeing through me, even when I thought I was being subtle. The rest of the day passed uneventfully. I spent some time helping my dad in the garden, pulling weeds and trimming hedges. It was strangely therapeutic, the repetitive motions giving my mind a chance to wander. That evening, we all gathered in the living room, something we hadn't done in years. My mom insisted on pulling out the old photo albums, flipping through pages of faded pictures and telling stories I'd heard 100 times before. "Remember this?" she said, holding up a photo of Caleb and me, our faces smeared with chocolate. I laughed, shaking my head. "I can't believe you still have that." "Of course I do," she said, smiling. "You two were so close back then." I glanced at Caleb, who was sitting on the floor, his back against the couch. He was smiling too, but there was something wistful in his expression. "Yeah," he said softly. "We were." The words hung in the air, heavy with unspoken meaning. Later that night, as I lay in bed, I couldn't stop thinking about what he had said by the creek. About how he had felt abandoned, how he had come to the creek to feel close to me. I had always thought of Caleb as the quiet one, the one who didn't need much, who was content to stay in the background. But now I was starting to see just how wrong I had been. There was so much I didn't know about him, so much I had missed while I was gone. And for the first time, I realized just how much I wanted to make it right. As I drifted off to sleep, I made a silent promise to myself. I would try. I didn't know if it would be enough, but I would try. For Caleb. For us. The next few days were a mix of awkward conversations and tentative steps toward something that resembled closeness. Caleb and I were like strangers learning to navigate a relationship that had once been so easy, so natural. It was strange how time could do that. Turn familiarity into distance, and distance into something heavier. One afternoon, my mom sent us out on an errand together. "You two can pick up the groceries," she said, handing me a list. "It'll be nice for you to spend some time together." I could tell she was trying to nudge us closer, and while I appreciated the effort, I wasn't sure how well it would work. Caleb didn't seem thrilled about it either, but he didn't protest. The drive to the store was quiet. Caleb stared out the window, his fingers drumming against his knee. I fiddled with the radio, trying to find something to fill the silence. "You still listen to this stuff?" he asked suddenly, nodding toward the station I'd landed on. I glanced at him, surprised. "What, classic rock?" "Yeah." "Why?" He shrugged. "You used to play it all the time. Drove me crazy back then." I laughed, the sound breaking the tension. "Yeah, I remember. You'd always complain, but then I'd catch you humming along." He smirked, and for a moment, it felt like we were kids again, teasing each other over the smallest things. At the store, we split up to make the shopping faster. I took the produce aisle while Caleb headed for the snacks. As I was picking out apples, I couldn't help but notice how natural it felt to be doing something so mundane with him. When we met back at the checkout, Caleb had a bag of chips in his hand. "Mom didn't put this on the list," I pointed out, raising an eyebrow. "Yeah, well, I figured we deserved a treat," he said with a shrug. I rolled my eyes but didn't argue. On the drive back, the conversation came more easily. We talked about little things, movies, music, the weird neighbors who used to live down the street. It wasn't deep or meaningful, but it was something, and that was enough for now. When we got home, my mom was in the kitchen, humming to herself as she prepared dinner. Caleb and I unloaded the groceries, and for the first time in years, felt like we were working as a team. Later that evening, my dad suggested we watch a movie together. "Like old times," he said, his eyes twinkling. We settled into the living room, the lights dimmed and a bowl of popcorn on the coffee table. Caleb sat on the floor, leaning against the couch, while I took the armchair. My parents shared the love seat, my mom's head resting on my dad's shoulder. The movie was one we'd seen a dozen times before. A cheesy action flick with over-the-top explosions and terrible dialogue. But somehow it was perfect. About halfway through, I glanced at Caleb. He was laughing at something on the screen. His face lit up in a way I hadn't seen in years. It hit me then how much I had missed this. Missed him. After the movie, my parents went to bed, leaving Caleb and me alone in the living room. The silence stretched between us, but it wasn't uncomfortable. You know, Caleb said finally, his voice soft, I wasn't sure how this would go. You coming back? I looked at him, surprised by his honesty. Yeah, me neither, I admitted. He leaned back against the couch, his gaze fixed on the ceiling. It's weird, isn't it? How things change. Yeah, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. For a moment, neither of us said anything. Then he turned to me, his expression serious. Do you ever think about what it would have been like if you'd stayed? The question caught me off guard. I opened my mouth to respond but found I didn't know what to say. He continued, I get why you left. I really do. But sometimes I wonder, if you hadn't, would things be different? Would we be different? I sighed, running a hand through my hair. I don't know, Caleb. Maybe. But I think I needed to leave to figure out who I was. And maybe you needed me to leave, too, to figure out who you were without me. He nodded slowly, as if considering my words. Yeah, maybe. The clock on the wall chimed, breaking the silence. It was late, but neither of us seemed ready to go to bed. You know, I said, trying to lighten the mood, you've changed a lot since I left. He raised an eyebrow. Oh yeah? How so? You're more, confident, sure of yourself, I said. It's a good thing. I'm proud of you. His eyes widened slightly, and for a moment, I thought I saw a flicker of emotion cross his face. But then he smirked, leaning back against the couch. Careful, Elliot. You're starting to sound like a big brother again. I laughed, shaking my head. Guess some things never change. We stayed up talking for a while longer, the conversation shifting to lighter topics. By the time we finally decided to call it a night, I felt a sense of relief, a feeling that maybe, just maybe, we were starting to find our way back to each other. As I climbed the stairs to my room, I couldn't help but smile. Coming home had been hard, but for the first time, it felt like it was worth it. Caleb and I weren't there yet, but we were trying. And that was enough. For now. The next morning, I woke up to sunlight streaming through the curtains and the sound of laughter coming from outside. I rubbed my eyes, stretched, and for a moment, I just lay there, letting the warmth of the morning sink in. It had been a long time since I'd woken up feeling light. Curious about the noise, I got dressed and headed downstairs. When I stepped outside onto the porch, I saw Caleb and my dad in the backyard, tossing a football back and forth. My mom was sitting on a lawn chair nearby, a cup of tea in her hands and a contented smile on her face. Elliot, my dad called out, waving me over. Come join us. I hesitated for a moment. It had been years since I'd played catch with Caleb, and I wasn't sure if I still remembered how. But then Caleb turned to me, a playful grin on his face. Come on, old man, he teased. Let's see if you've still got it. Old man, I scoffed, stepping onto the grass. You're barely 2 years younger than me. Yeah, but I'm in better shape, he shot back, tossing the ball in my direction. Caught it barely and threw it back. The ball wobbled in the air, and Caleb laughed. Wow, that was pathetic. Give me a break, I said, laughing despite myself. I'm rusty. We spent the next hour playing catch, the banter between us growing more playful with each throw. My dad joined in for a while, but eventually, he stepped back to let Caleb and me have our moment. Felt good, better than I expected. There was a rhythm to it, an unspoken understanding that reminded me of how things used to be. Afterward, we all sat down for lunch on the patio. My mom had made sandwiches and lemonade, and we ate together under the shade of the old oak tree. The conversation was light, filled with jokes and stories, and for the first time in a long time, it felt like we were a family again. Later that afternoon, Caleb and I decided to tackle the attic. My mom had been asking someone to clean it out for years, and it seemed like the perfect excuse to spend more time together. The attic was just as I remembered it, dusty, cluttered, and filled with boxes of old memories. We started going through them, sorting things into piles. Keep, donate, and toss. "Hey, look at this," Caleb said, holding up a photo album. He flipped it open, and there we were, two kids with wide grins and scraped knees, standing in front of the creek. "I remember that day," I said, smiling. "We spent hours trying to catch frogs, and Mom got so mad because we came back covered in mud." Caleb laughed. "You were the one who fell in, not me. Only because you pushed me," I shot back, playfully shoving his shoulder. He grinned, flipping through the pages. "Man, we were such dorks." "Still are," I said, smirking. As we continued sorting through the boxes, we found more relics from our childhood, old toys, school projects, even a jar filled with coins we'd saved for a treasure hunt that never happened. "Hey, do you remember this?" Caleb asked, holding up a small wooden box. My breath caught. I hadn't seen that box in years. Inside were the letters we used to write to each other when we were kids. Notes passed under the dinner table, messages left on pillows, and even a few that we'd buried in the backyard, pretending we were pirates. "I can't believe you kept these," I said, taking the box from him. "Of course I did," he said, his voice softer now. "They were important to me." I opened the box and pulled out one of the letters. The handwriting was messy, the words misspelled, but the sentiment was clear. Asterisk, "Dear Caleb, I'm sorry I ate your candy. Please don't tell Mom. I'll give you my dessert tonight, okay? Love, Elliot." Asterisk. Caleb burst out laughing. "Wow, you were such a little thief." "Hey, I made up for it," I said, grinning. We spent the rest of the afternoon reading through the letters, laughing at our younger selves and reminiscing about the past. It was bittersweet, but it also felt like we were reclaiming something we'd lost. As the sun began to set, we carried the keep pile downstairs and left the rest for donation. My mom was thrilled to see the attic finally organized, and my dad joked that we should come back more often if it meant getting things done around the house. That evening, Caleb and I sat on the porch, watching the stars come out. The air was cool, and the faint sound of crickets filled the silence. "Thanks for today," Caleb said after a while. I glanced at him, surprised. "For what?" "For everything," he said, his gaze fixed on the sky. "For coming back. For trying." I nodded, my chest tightening. "I should have tried sooner," I admitted. "Maybe," he said, shrugging. "But you're here now. That's what matters." We sat there for a while longer, the silence between us comfortable. For the first time in years, I felt like we were on the same page, like we were finally starting to understand each other. As I headed to bed that night, I couldn't help but feel a sense of hope. Things weren't perfect, and they probably never would be, but we were trying. And for now, that was enough. The next few days passed in a blur of quiet moments and small, meaningful steps toward healing. Caleb and I had fallen into an easy rhythm, the kind that only siblings could share. It wasn't like everything was magically fixed. There were still unspoken things between us, lingering shadows of the years we'd spent apart. But those shadows didn't feel so heavy anymore. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and bathed the house in a warm, golden light, Caleb knocked on my bedroom door. "Got a minute?" he asked, leaning casually against the doorframe. "Sure," I said, setting down the book I'd been pretending to read. He stepped inside, his hands shoved into his pockets. For a moment, he didn't say anything, just looked around my room like he was seeing it for the first time. "You know," he said finally, "when you left, I was really angry." I blinked, caught off guard by his sudden honesty. "I know," I said quietly. "No, I mean, I wasn't just angry. I was hurt," he continued, his voice steady but soft. "It felt like you didn't care, like you were just leaving us behind." I opened my mouth to respond, but he held up a hand to stop me. "I get it now," he said. "Why you had to go. I think I was just scared. Scared that if you left, you wouldn't come back. And for a while, it felt like you didn't." His words hit me like a punch to the gut. I'd always known that my leaving had hurt him, but hearing him say it out loud made it feel so much more real. "I'm sorry," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "I never meant to make you feel like that. I needed to figure things out. I needed to figure me out." He nodded, his gaze fixed on the floor. "I know, and I'm glad you did. But I just wanted you to know. I missed you. A lot." "I missed you too," I said, my throat tightening. For a moment we just stood there, the weight of everything we'd been holding on to finally starting to lift. Then, Caleb did something that completely caught me off guard. He stepped forward and hugged me. It wasn't one of those quick, awkward hugs we'd exchanged as kids. It was real, solid, and filled with all the things we couldn't put into words. "Don't disappear again, okay?" he said, his voice muffled against my shoulder. "I won't," I promised, my voice thick with emotion. After that, things felt lighter. Not perfect, but better. Caleb and I started spending more time together, playing video games, going for walks, even helping my dad fix the old shed in the backyard. It was like we were rebuilding something that had been broken for a long time. On my last night at home, my mom made a big dinner. A proper send-off, she called it. The table was filled with all my favorite dishes, and the room buzzed with laughter and conversation. As we sat there, surrounded by the people I loved most in the world, I realized something. Coming home hadn't just been about reconnecting with my family. It had been about reconnecting with myself, with the person I used to be before life got so complicated. After dinner, Caleb and I sat on the porch one last time. The stars were bright, and the air was cool, carrying with it the faint scent of lavender from my mom's garden. "So," Caleb said, breaking the silence, "what's next for you?" I shrugged, looking up at the sky. "I'm not sure, but I think I'll visit more often. Maybe even move back someday." He smirked. "Don't make promises you can't keep." "I mean it," I said, nudging him with my elbow. "This place, it's home, and I don't want to lose that again." He nodded, a small smile playing on his lips. "Good, because I'm not letting you off the hook this time." We sat there for a while longer, talking about everything and nothing, until the chill in the air finally drove us inside. The next morning, as I loaded my suitcase into the car, my mom hugged me tightly, her eyes misty. "Take care of yourself, sweetheart," she said. "I will," I promised, kissing her cheek. My dad clapped me on the shoulder, his grip firm. "Don't be a stranger, okay?" "Never," I said, smiling. Finally, I turned to Caleb. He didn't say anything, just pulled me into another hug. "See you soon," he said, his voice steady. "Yeah," I said, my throat tightening. "See you soon." As I drove away, the house grew smaller in my rearview mirror, but the warmth I felt stayed with me. Coming home hadn't been easy, but it had been worth it. Because sometimes, the hardest journeys are the ones that bring us back to where we belong.